What is up, y'all? Welcome to this episode of the Dreamers and Action Takers podcast. I have one of my favorite people here today, Danielle Fenster. Not only does she have incredible style, she has beautiful purple hair as well, but she is an amazing coach that helps people with their internal breakthroughs around money and business and parenting and supernatural childbirth and all of the above. She is a mom to four. She lives in Chicago, Illinois. Fun fact, she has a hair salon in her house, which I have seen because I did not believe at first. And between her and her husband, they have 20 businesses. So welcome, Danielle. I'm so excited to have you today.
Thanks, Mary. I'm excited to be here with you this morning.
So you and Walden met and got married in 58 days. Can you share a little bit of that story?
Yes, it sounds crazy. A lot of people, when they hear that, they're like, oh, so it was love at first sight. I'm like, that's what you'd think, right? To meet and marry in 58 days. But it wasn't. I actually didn't know that he was my husband when I met him. Some people are like, that person across the room, like, that's my husband. I'm like, no, I didn't see it like that. I had been it was the first time that I had actually diligently prayed for something. And what I mean by like diligent is that not only did I ask, but I got specific about what I wanted. It was like the first time I had been introduced to even just this idea that you could ask for whatever you wish. And I was like, okay, I don't really know. Like, I believe in God, but I don't know if all this stuff I'm learning about is like true. I had, heard a testimony from somebody else. And I was like, she was talking about all these incredible things that Jesus had done in her life. And I'm like, I'm not really happy with where I'm at. I don't really like where my life's going. So I was like, I'll test it. Like, let's see, I'll make a list. I'll see what happens. And the moment I accepted Jesus into my life, things started to change. Like things that were like, it was like high level where your brain's like, it must be a coincidence, but like daily. And as it's happening, like I would go to bed and like ask him a question, like pray about something, like, and it was still kind of that, like, I felt weird. Like I'm talking out loud, like, Lord, like, okay, you're real. Like, if you are real, like I have this question, go to sleep and wake up, like open my email box and like a headliner and like an email would be like the answer to the question I asked for.
Wow.
And I'm like, like, what is that? Like, what is that? So then it was like, okay, I see you, I think, right? Like, and then like another thing like that would happen where it's like I would ask a question or be like looking for something. And it's like, I have a hair salon in my house. I used to do hair. And I'd have like a client come over and say something. Like I remember I had this one client that like loved Jesus and like stuff would come out of her mouth. And I was like, she doesn't know that I was like praying about that or asking like that. And she'd be like, oh, he just wants you to know this. And I'm like, okay, that's strange. Right. Like cool. Like, and now I'm starting to be like, okay, this is like really cool. Like, okay, then like what else? So it went from being like, is this real? Like, does this work? To like, okay, I think he sees me. I think he hears me. To like, okay, come on. Like, how do you explain this? Like, how else? Like it keeps happening over and over and over again. So I was like, all right, God, let me make this list of like 75 things in a man. To my mind, it was like, doesn't exist. Kind of like good luck. Like, I'll get married if you can find this person. Because I never really wanted to get married. And so I had made this like extensive list. Like sometimes people were like, I have 5 things. I'm like, maybe we get more specific. Like maybe we make it even more like challenging because there's this mindset like, well, if I get 80% of it, it'll be good. And it's like, God's not limited to 80%. Like he's not limited to anything. We limit ourselves. So when I met Walden, I didn't realize like he was, I want to say like the list, like he's obviously not a list, like he's a human. But in talking with him, there was like, I genuinely was like, man, like this guy's like a really great guy. This is incredible. Like I felt like almost like this feeling of like, oh my gosh, we're going to be like best friends. Like he was living in Wyoming. I was living in Chicago. We met in Florida. So it was like, I didn't think probably like relationship wise because of like that distance. I was like, oh, we're going to be like great friends. And by like the 3rd day in Florida, when I had been talking to him, it literally felt like my ear got pulled. And this was one of the first times I had felt, second time I had actually felt like a physical sensation from like the spirit. I had another time where I felt like God was actually like hugging me and like comforting me. And Actually, it was in that same week, now that I'm thinking about it. So I was like, okay, now this is like next level interesting. Like Walden's talking and I'm not looking at him. And I feel like my ear got pulled like by the spirit, like, right, there wasn't a physical person grabbing my ear. It was like, got pulled and I turned and it was literally like, I just felt like as my ear was being pulled, like, listen to what he's saying. You know, how like you've probably been in conversations where it's like you're listening, but you're not like listening. You're like hearing the person, but you're not hearing the person. That's what I was doing. And I didn't realize it. It was like, listen, like, oh, this is nice. And it was like, no, like, listen to what he's saying. And as I'm like, now this is a deeper level of like receiving what he's saying, I'm like, oh my gosh, like he's talking about things that are on the list. Like, could this be? And so when we'd both phone home, I did a phone call with him, like with my list in front of me, like he didn't know. And I was just like, all the things, like, so how many kids do you want? And I just went through all of it. And it's like, he didn't know me. So it wasn't like he could answer the questions like with what he thought I wanted to hear. He genuinely was answering them for what they were. And I was like, oh my God, like sitting there like, Lord, like, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And then a couple of days later, I was sitting in my kitchen and the Lord said, this is your husband. This is who I sent.
Wow. And 58 days later.
I mean, from the day of saying like, hi, I'm Danielle, hi, I'm Alden, from that day to being married is 58 days.
Wow. That's so cool.
Yeah. So people hear that, right? So it's like, it's very different than a love at first sight.
Yeah.
And if you can imagine, a lot of people thought we were crazy, which is what faith looks like. Like faith is supposed to look peculiar. Like it's not supposed to look normal or like, ooh, the safe route, like date for 7 years and then get engaged for 3 and then get married and then you'll really know. I'm like, do you really ever know? Like really? I mean, when God tells you, you know, like that's different. But like, so even I remember when God said like, this is him. It was like literally like, well, what are you waiting for? Do you want it like, and it was like, well, if God knows, why would I wait 2 years?
Yeah.
He knows, and this is what's going to happen. Like, let's just do it now. And so then he moved to Chicago. But I remember, yeah, a lot of people were like concerned and worried, which like, I'm sure if you think about any like decision you've made in faith or led by God, that there are people that are like, why are you doing this? This concerns me. Are you sure? Right. And if you aren't like, which can be like, then you have a choice. Like, are you going to listen to like, no, I know this sounds crazy. I know this sounds wild, but I know that God told me. Like, there's too many coincidences for this to be anything else. Or you have a choice. Be like, yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe and I think about that often. Like, man, if I wouldn't have listened to God, like it's 9 years later, we have 4 kids, we have 20 active entities together. It's been an adventure. And I'm like, I could have missed all of this. Wow. Now, I don't believe that you can miss out like with God. Like, I don't believe he would have showed me this. I'm like, you missed it. Like, it wouldn't have been like that. But I just think of like the power of just trusting him and saying yes, like how great it is. Versus I could have been like, I felt crazy when I like flew to Denver and was like, all right, Lord, I'm going to tell him. He's going to either be like, you're crazy pants. I'm dropping you back off at the airport. I never want to see you again. I'm like, well, it's going to be great. It's going to be one or the other. I don't know what it's going to be, but let's see what he says.
Wait, so what did he say when you told him, hey, you're going to be my husband?
Yeah. He said he felt the same way.
Oh. So did God tell him around at the same time?
You know what's crazy about having this conversation? Walden and I went out to dinner last night and he told me that last night. However, it came up, but he told me like, God told me you were my wife. I'm like, wait, hold on. We've been married 9 years. You have never told me that God told you this. Like, this is new information to me. Isn't that crazy too? We were like, wow. You know somebody. I'm like, I'm 9 years in. And I still am like, tell me more about that. I didn't know that this happened 9 years ago. I didn't know. Like, there's always new stuff to uncover. And he's like, yeah, he's like, I was on the phone with you one night sitting with my stepbrother and he had handed the phone to his stepbrother. So I met him like over the phone. And he was like, when he hung up, like when you were talking to my stepbrother, he's like, I felt like that's what God had said. And then I told him, I feel like she's my wife. Like, I feel like I'm going to marry her. And his stepbrother was like, what are you talking about? Like, you just met her.
Wow.
So I was like, oh, yeah, I didn't know that. And then also when he got invited to come to Florida, his friend that invited him, he was like, at first he didn't want to go. Like, he was kind of like, I don't know. And then when they decided like, okay, yeah, I'll come. He said jokingly when they were leaving the restaurant, he's like, well, yeah, you never know. Maybe I'll meet my future wife there. also coming out of a voice of somebody who he never wanted to get married either. So the fact that he even joke about that was like, it's not like something he'd said before. And then his stepbrother to be like, dude, what did you just say?
Wow. It's so funny too that last night, that's when Walden told you, because I've heard this story before and I love this story. And even when I saw you in person, we were talking about y'all like meeting to going married. And today I was like, wait, did Walden get told the same thing? You wouldn't have been able to get like answer it before because you found out last night.
Yeah.
That's cool.
It is really cool. See, another, not like just those little things, right? Like as soon as you ask, I'm like, this is so cool. Like I actually have an answer.
Yeah.
Just told me.
Wow. So you have a lot of like faith stories that could be seen as crazy.
Yeah.
To some people. I thought that they were crazy the first time I heard a couple of them.
Yes.
But I love them. And I think that they're so cool because what it did for me is it like expanded my brain on what was possible. And one of them that you have is you've had 3 supernatural childbirths.
Yeah.
You have 4 kids. So one of them was a little different.
Little.
A little. And I would love to like hear the story and like for other people to be able to hear the story, because one thing that you've experienced in your life is like you've been able to see what's possible by just asking and like being willing to go through the process of it. Yeah. So can you share a little bit of the story of like not having a supernatural childbirth and then what it looked like having a supernatural childbirth?
Yeah, for sure. So I knew before we had ever even conceived our first child that I wanted to do it. Like I had a desire to do it at home. I had a desire to do it naturally. I had heard other testimonials. So I knew that I knew it was rare, but I knew that it was possible. So it was like, that's what I want. And it's interesting now to even think, I'm like, why did I want that? Because it's not, I know sometimes people have like a fear of like a hospital or have different thoughts, or maybe even right the opposite, have a fear of a home birth. And it was just like, I just wanted to, I feel like I had been walking in faith and trusting the Lord. And like, he was like, I just felt at peace. Like, I don't need to do this at a hospital. I don't need to do this like the modern, let's say like traditional way. And that's exactly what I got. Like, I didn't do a hospital birth. I know my family was concerned, kind of like, it's like no one in our family had ever done like a home birth. They were like, oh my gosh, what if something happens? What if something goes wrong? Like, what is it gonna look like? And I remember like compromising, being like, okay, I don't know right now if I am at the place of faith to do this at home, but I know I don't want to do it in hospital. So I ended up finding a birthing center. I was like, okay, this is kind of like best of both worlds. Like, we'll hybrid this and I'll do this like naturally. And I remember I had done like some like classes of like breathing exercises and things that would like help in visualizations. And I know that I have, I know that I can be like, when I set my mind on something, it's like, man, it's going to get done. So it's like, I felt convicted that I wouldn't like, that I'd be able to follow through with it. What I didn't know is that it was going to be like 22 and a half hours. And the back like 12 hours was so crazy intense that I remember having multiple times where I was just praying like, Lord, can I just like watch up there with you? Like, can I just take me out of my body and I'll just watch it up there with you? And I had like 3 times where like Walden was like, you just were like gone. Like you weren't even like, I was talking to you. It was like you were looking like straight through me. It was like, I wasn't even there. I'm like, because this is what I prayed. I believe I was gone. Because there was like multiple like 3-hour blocks where it was like, I don't remember the time. So, and I just did that because the pain was so intense, like so intense. So I felt like I was gonna like pass out. We were like even like throwing up at once, like just, I felt like I didn't have energy to even like cry or yell. It was just like, almost like that feeling of like, I don't know that I thought this, but I'm thinking back, I'm like, it's kind of like you feel like you're dying. Like in that state, like, I don't know. And a lot of people will say like, the moment you feel like you're going to die, it's right when the baby's going to come out. I'm like, well, my baby didn't come out for a very long time. And actually she was crowning like at her eyebrow line for almost 3.5 hours. Okay. For those of you who have had children, right? Like your body as a baby, where the baby's at the eyebrow line, right? Like that, for holding for almost, it was like 3 hours and 15 minutes. Like unmedicated. And like, she was cone shaped, like she had indentations around her forehead and her eyebrow line because she was there for so long. My body was holding it. So I know a lot of times after like people have babies, especially like naturally, they're like, oh my gosh, this was amazing. I want another one. I can't wait. I was like looking at Walden like, no, don't even look at me. Like this is going to take you some time to forget about. Like, I don't want to do this again. Like, I want to do it again because I want another baby, but like not anytime soon. And what I didn't realize was that I was aware that birth could be done outside of a hospital. I was aware that birth could be done without medication. But what I wasn't aware of is that birth could be done supernaturally. And that we have, through the covenant, we have available a pain-free birth and other beautiful things. But like in that moment, it was like, if I could do this again without pain, like all day long, like I will have like a litter of children, like just give them all to me. I love kids. And so what I feel really, really strong in my heart about sharing is like, when we think about a birth or even just anything, we really do what we believe is available and what we believe is possible. So it's like, if we only think in this example, like if we only think a hospital birth is possible, then we do the hospital birth. But if we're aware, like, oh, I could choose to do it at a birthing center, or I could choose to do it at home, and what would that look like? Now we have different options. So when I discovered like I could have a supernatural birth instead of a natural birth, I could have a birth without pain, like, yes, please, I'll take that one. And so with our second baby, completely different experience at home. She came in like 30 minutes. Walden delivered her because the midwife didn't make it in time because it was literally happened so quickly. And it was not only pain-free, it was like euphoric, like pleasurable. Like I remember like her coming out and I'm like chanting yes. And I remember Walden's holding her and I'm like, is there another one? I want another one to come on. He's like, oh my gosh, take this baby. Like, right, his adrenaline's up. Like he's never delivered a baby before. He was like, what just happened? And I didn't even know because no one was like with me. I remember being like, Lord, I don't even know if I can push. Like I feel open, but I don't know if I can push, or my body just like naturally pushed. And it was like, I'm crowning. Like last time this was like a full day, right? 22 and a half hours. This, I'm like, it's been like 7 minutes. Like, and a baby's about to come out. So after having that experience, I was like, and with all of my births too, even having a baby like in 30 minutes, there was like no tearing. There was no, like a lot of times, sometimes people think like, oh yeah, you got to have this, but then this didn't happen, right? Like it happened fast, but then there was this other like negative consequence. I'm like, nope, everything was like exactly as I asked for. And with Charlotte, who's our second, I made a list like I did when I made the list for Walden. And he answered every single thing that was on that list. And then so I had another baby, supernaturally, a different story, but still like pain-free, incredible. And then another baby. And next year, our fourth also came like in an hour, maybe 10 minutes. But like, if I would have never known, like if someone would have never opened their mouth to even say like that it's possible to have a pain-free birth, I wouldn't have even known. Now, what's interesting is a lot of times things like this are presented to people and they're like, no way, that can't be possible. It's like, okay. Just because you don't believe it's possible doesn't mean that it's not available. So there's a difference, right? Just because you reject it or think like, it can't happen doesn't mean that that's the truth. So even in that, I've coached like many women on birth, and even recently, I'm going to be sharing a story here soon. Coached one of my best friends through birth, and she had like the most beautiful, amazing experience after having like 4 incredibly painful childbirths, like in excruciating pain, where with all of her births, she's like, I lost my voice because I was screaming so much from the pain.
Wow. And
this one, like I just saw the birth video, and she's like singing and she's like rejoicing, like in almost like just this shock of like, there's no pain. Like, oh my gosh, there's no pain. And like, it just moved me to tears that it's like, same thing, like loves children, wants to have kids, but she's like, man, that like the labor and delivery is like dread. Whereas this one, she's like, oh man, girl, like everyone needs to know about this. She's like, as a friend of mine, she's like, I've heard your stories. I've heard you talk about this. I've wanted to believe it was possible. And she finally this last year was like, all right, let's go. Like, I want to believe for this. I want to do what it takes to believe for it. And she got it.
Wow.
And yeah. And now it's like, okay, what else is available? If I didn't think this was available and then I found out it was and now I got it, what does that mean about other areas of my life?
So this story is like insane for one of the reasons, because I've never heard anybody else talk about a pain-free birth. Like, I've never had kids, but I like didn't want kids because of the childbirth aspect of it. I'm like, why would I want to go through that? Like, why would I want to experience that? Like, that sounds horrible. I'll adopt. There's so many kids who need adoption. Like, I'll just adopt, then I don't have to go through that like process and like actually have a painful childbirth. But like, if that's true, if it's like, hey, pain-free childbirth is available, like, what are some of the other things? Do you really think it's as simple as like, hey, just asking for it and like having the faith to believe that it's possible in so many other areas?
Well, so it's two-part, right? There's the ask and there's the belief.
Okay.
A lot of times people won't even ask because they don't believe, but it doesn't mean that just because you've asked, you believe.
Yeah.
So I see this over and over again because of even just not like coaching people through birth, but coaching them through business and relationships, through like trials and different hardships. There's, right, like even placing before like certain desires, things we ask for, but if we don't believe it, and there's many different factors that can play into what would come against, because we can even say we think we believe it, but then when we actually like get down like in coaching and uncover stuff, like there are things that are actually blocked, like the conscious mind's like, well, I believe it, but then there's things that are blocking that you don't actually believe it, which is totally normal. And seeing in those patterns. So that's why even with my friend recently walking her through this, there was a lot, if you can imagine, right? Like it's not only having like one birth that was excruciatingly painful, she had 4. So she has like a lot of experiencing what she didn't want. So it made it a little bit, and everyone's different, but it made it a little bit more challenging to get to that place of like full belief, like fully persuaded that this is going to happen. Whereas somebody with a different, like, so for me having it with my second, there were things that like I believed quicker than sometimes other people believe, but everyone's just different. So that's where it really is highly valuable to have a coach that knows how to look for these things and find these things, because sometimes it isn't as simple as just being like, okay, I believe, okay, great, I believe for it. That is possible, right? Like all things are possible with God. And then the mind could be like, well, yeah, no, that sounds great, I want it. But what if it doesn't? No, I want, that sounds great. But what if it happens like last time? Or like other things come like, oh, I want it, but like my husband's not on board. Like he doesn't think this is a good idea, so I probably shouldn't. Like all these other thoughts that want to come up and negate the belief.
So when that happens, like, is that where coaching comes in? When your brain's like, oh my gosh, no, like look at the evidence of the bad. Is that like when coaching comes in, or is there something else that people can do if they're like consciously aware of these thoughts that are against the belief?
Well, so the thing with like the mind is typically like when you're believing something, you've either already believed it your whole life, or you've believed it for long enough that it is like camped out, pitched a tent, like not going anywhere. So it's really challenging for the mind that already believes something to get out of that state, to get out of that belief by itself. It's kind of like the same mind that got you there is not the same mind that's going to get you out.
Yeah.
Now, like all things are possible with God. So I for sure am aware of like, I would never diminish that of like what he can do. And we're also aware that like iron sharpens iron and that we benefit from community. So there are things like, have you ever even experienced like that? There are things like you can so clearly see in someone else, but they can't see it in themselves.
Yeah.
Like I was even just smiling like on your, like when you opened this podcast episode, you recently made a reel and you're like, wait a minute, is this like my line? Like, do I say this? And you're like, yeah, you say it. And you're like, I had no idea. Like something as simple as that. You're like, right? Like, what's up, y'all? And you're like, wait, do I really? I'm like noticing something, like, right? Like, because it's been recorded, right? You're like, I'm noticing something. Like, is this a pattern of mine? Do I say this? And your viewers are like, yeah, girl, you say it. Like
Every time.
So they can see it faster than you can see it. So right, like you came to that on your own. No one was like, hey Mary, did you like, it's cute, right? It's not like there's like some problem with it. It's like, no one's like, hey Mary, did you notice? You'd be like, no, I didn't notice. So it's like you realized it after some time. But like, let's say in birth, it's like, okay, well, I'm pregnant. I'm gonna be delivering like in 8 months. You usually find out like after you're like a month or so pregnant. You'll be delivering in 8 months. Do you want to take the time to like figure it out on your own? Or do you want to expedite it and shortcut it and be like, okay, I want to get this now? Like, oh, maybe I'll be ready for it by like my 4th birth, like 6 or 7 years from now. Or do you want to be ready in 8 months? Like, you want to be ready to go now. So like somebody highlighting even just something simple like that, where it's like, oh, I didn't see that. Oh man, I didn't realize that was what was happening. It's like having another set of eyes, like how badly do you want this belief? Like you can go figure it out on your own. It is going to take longer for sure. Guarantee. That's just how it works. Or like a coach can be like, let me come in and show you what you can't see. Let me help you shortcut this. Let me help narrow this in. Like even with my friend, it's like she already had 4. She was like, Danielle, I realize I cannot do this by myself.
Yeah.
She even tried with her 4th, because now this is her 5th, her 4th. She even did do that, where it was like, she watched some of my videos, we had some conversations. It was better. Like the 4th was better than the first 3, but there was definitely pain. And she was like, that's the one thing I like really, really didn't want.
And then for the 4th, she didn't have it. Which is
her 5th.
Didn't have
now she didn't have 5, which is crazy. Like now she got 5 kids. Oh yeah, 5th she didn't have. Completely different. Like
so cool. One of the things, and this story stands out to me, is the fact of like seeing what's possible and then being able to step into it. And it's like, I think that for me, at least, it was one, I had to even believe that it was possible. So I had to see evidence of it for other people.
Right.
Danielle posted, was it 3 years ago now? Almost 4.
I think it was New Year's. I remember this vividly. I actually thought of this right when you started asking me these questions. I wrote it down. I'm like, I know what story you're going to tell. Thank you, Holy Spirit. I posted it on, it was New Year's of 19 going into 2020. So it's December 31st.
Okay. Yeah. So almost 2.5, it was like 2.5-ish years ago.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell the flight story?
I think it'd be fun maybe to hear your perspective. Okay. Like, cause I didn't know this about you until like a few months ago. And you're like, you remember that post? I'm like, I do remember that post. And you're like, so no, share your side. Okay. Now. Yeah.
Okay. So New Year's Eve, Danielle posts the story, and Danielle and I like didn't really have a relationship at that point. Like I knew of her, but like we didn't.
It's that crazy chick that sometimes her posts show up on my feed.
Yeah. I'm like, what the heck? Like, I don't know. She believes for things to happen and they happen. And like, what is she smoking something? Like, what is going on? So she posts this, and it's like her crazy, like miracle flight story. And basically, I think that you were running late. From what I remember, you were running late. I think that literally you hit like every green light going to the airport. Walden didn't think that you were going to make it. You made it. And he like waits out in the car. You go up to the desk to check your bag, and you had prayed for essentially the time to stand still. And so whatever airline it was, they said that they wouldn't. He was like, I don't think it's going to work. I don't think it's going to let me, blah, blah, blah. And you had the belief to literally ask them to like try it anyways, like try to check your bag anyways. And the clocks stood still. So like whatever, 45 minutes, an hour. And your bag was able to be checked, and you made it on the flight, and you made it on your trip. Yeah. And I remember seeing that story, and I was like, that's not possible. Like clearly it was possible because like that's what happened for her, but my brain was trying to comprehend how this was even possible. Like, how were you able to have like the clock stand still? How was it able that you like made it on this flight? I think that even with supernatural, like all of these things, like how was this able to happen? And a couple of weeks ago, I like had a similar experience at the airport, waking up 55 minutes before my flight left. But it was so cool because I knew what to pray for and what to believe for, because I had already read your story and I had already seen it.
Yeah.
And I had the belief because we'd been coaching together. And so I had been able to figure out, hey, what was holding me back? Mm-hmm. Hey, what did this look like? And so it was 1, I saw it from somebody else. 2, I was able to like get rid of some of my own limiting beliefs. And then I knew what to believe for.
Yeah.
Because while I was on the way to the airport, felt the Lord say, like, ask me for what you want.
Yeah.
I got exactly that.
Yeah. That's a key part too. We just shared being able to hear, right? Hear Holy Spirit say, he gave instruction, right? Ask for whatever you want.
Yeah.
So like when I had shared about my first supernatural childbirth, where she came in like 30 minutes, the Lord had told me the midwife wasn't going to make it. So this is different, you know, like a lot of times people are like, can even look at this as like, oh, like you just showed up and like, you know, thought you had the authority to make the time stand still. It's like, well, what if God actually told me what to ask for? Like, what if he actually highlighted how this was going to go? And he's like, agree with me, like align with me, agree with me on this, and it'll be done. Versus being like, I can just show up whenever I want and the clock will stand still for me because that's, you know, just who I am and how it works. Right? Like there's a difference there. So even like with Charlotte, he had prepared me. This is like the level of like receiving from the Holy Spirit. He prepared me. Like I knew she was going to come fast. I knew she was going to come in the morning, like before noon. Like I had the sense that she's going before noon. She's going to come in the morning. The midwife's not going to make it. It's going to be fast. I had prepped, like my husband was like, I do not want to deliver a baby. I'm like, can you just like humor me and we just kind of role play this? Like, grab that snowman, pretend it's a baby. I'm like, let's just practice. Like, where are we going to go if she's not here? Like, what's the position going to be like? So we already had it in our mind so that like in the moment, right, she's not here. It's not like, oh, fear. Fear is just like, I don't know what to do. Versus like, oh, wait, like he said she wasn't going to come. Oh yeah, we practiced. You remember that snowman? This is how we did it. Okay, let's go over there and pretend like this is that time, right? Like, no big deal, just a baby. So when I remember that day going to the airport, it was already like, we're going up to the garage and it was like, I remember I looked at my phone, I was like, okay, Lord Jesus, like the only way we make it is every green light, no traffic, like to the minute, like we are going to like just be making it. I clicked the button to open the garage door and it had like blizzarded out. Like it, and I'm like, oh, well, I didn't factor in snow. Like I didn't even factor in a light dusting, let alone like someone needs to shovel the driveway. But we don't have time for that. We're just gonna drive right over this. Like it's not good. And so now so even from my place of like faith of like, okay, like we can make it with no traffic and with all the green lights. And now I see the snow, I'm like, this is like an opportunity to increase my faith. Because I'm like, with snow, this is different. This could make us not make it. I remember Walden being like, there's no way. Like, there's no way you're not gonna make it. And he also didn't want me to leave. Like it was New Year's. Like who wants their wife to like leave? I did invite him. He had said no. Now he was wanting to change his mind. So there's a little bit of that too. Like he's probably like, yes, like secretly like, I don't want her to go. But I was actually going to like a 3-day like worship, like praising and worshiping in the new year. And then like for 3 days. So I was like, I know where the Lord wants me. Like, I know he wants me there. Like, so I remember we were driving, I just was intentional about like what I was speaking, like what I was thinking when I was speaking, like about making it. And I remember having that thought come in, like, could he stop the time? Like, could this be, because like, right, looking at it, it's like speed wise, like we're not going to make it, but could he even go one further and like, not just like make the roads clear, but could he like hold the time? And so I remember like Walden didn't just drop me off and leave. He sat there because he was like, if you don't have your bag checked by a certain time, they're like, they won't let you on the flight. So he's like, I'm just gonna wait for you because you're not getting on the flight. So like, I'll just wait for you so you can come back to the car. So as I'm standing there, I can see the computer screen. I ask the guy and tell him where I'm going. And he's like, well, when's your flight? And he's like, I see the time. So like, let's just say for the sake, let's say it says like 7:40, but 7:40 was the cutoff. And as he's like asking me, like it's already like, you're not going to make it. I'm like, could you just do it anyways? Could you just like take my ID and just like do it anyways? This is like the curbside. And so he's entering it. And the whole time he's like, yeah, I'm sorry. Like you're going to have to go inside and get a different flight. Like it's not going to take it. And I'm just standing there like staring at the clock as he's talking and moving like uber slow. And the clock's not changing time. And I'm like, does anybody else see this? That it's still on the time? And as he's doing, he goes, wait, like the ticket prints out. He's like, wait, I have no idea how that just worked. I was like, I do. He's like, that should not have gone through. He's like, all right, well, here's your boarding pass. And so I turn around and walk, and I get to the car and I look at the car clock and it's 6 minutes past what that computer clock said.
Wow.
And Walden's like, how did he just take your bag? I'm like, because that clock says says it's time. But here's what's crazy. I had encountered things like that at the airport specifically, but I had never seen it. Like, I experienced favor, like in grace, like where it's like, I shouldn't have made it, but I did make it. But I had never seen, like, I felt like it was like this upgrade of like spiritual eyes. Like I had never seen, I'm like, is this what it looks like in the spirit realm? Like it's being held, but now you're actually showing me like what it looks like.
Wow.
But like that, because there's like, if you see the curbside, a lot of times there's more than one computer screen. And I remember trying to look over because I was like, is it just this one that I'm standing at that's stopped and the other one's fine? Like, because when the guy kept saying it, it wasn't like the guy looked up and being like, I think our clock's broke. I think this stopped working. Like, I was like, does he not see that it hasn't changed? So, I mean, clearly I needed to carry on and get on my flight, you know, and this is the beautiful thing about faith. I'm like, I don't need everyone around, not everybody around me needs to see it. If they don't need to see it, they don't need to understand. It's like, that's what favor looks like. Like, I'm supposed to be there. So he's making a way. And I remember being like, and Lord telling me like, post it. And so Mary didn't tell me till, I don't know, maybe 4 months ago or something. You brought up, you're like, do you remember that post? Like, is this for real? I'm like, it's for real.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
That post like blew my mind and I couldn't comprehend it. And I think that that's what faith's supposed to do. Like, it's not supposed to be just like natural of like, in the natural, like I can just pick up my, whatever this is, my protein drink. Yeah. And like, it's easy. Like this makes sense when I like grab it and I lift it, right. Like that makes sense.
Right.
Like faith isn't supposed to look the same way.
So, like even the definition of supernatural is that like, it cannot be explained.
Wow.
Like, so right, you're like, naturally, you're like, I can explain picking up my cup. The supernatural experience, it's like, there is not a way to explain how or why that happened other than God. Mm-hmm. It's literally supposed to be like, wait, what?
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think our entire lives are supposed to look like that in the like supernatural of like, this is God?
I think I'm very like intentional about like word choice. So I personally wouldn't say that they're supposed to, because I think they're supposed to look like whatever you want them to look like, because you have free will. So you get to decide what you want it to look like. Do I think it's possible for them to look like that? Yes, 100%. And can be in a state where they continually look like that? Yeah. But we're so conditioned and programmed with how like the earth realm works, like how the earth system works, that our brain is like, wait, what? Like that there's a level like in the brain that it takes work to get to that place. Yeah. It takes work to believe a new thing. Like when you think about even being, you know, like sold as a child about like Santa, it's like childlike faith, like full faith, like believes right away. And then there's this, right, like undoing, or like you find out like that it's not true. And so there's a lot of things too, even in life, where it's like we believe things are true and we found out we're not. So then we're more guarded to believe things because we're like, no, because we want to like mitigate the pain or mitigate the disappointment. So like we won't go full on, because we're like, you're just like that example, like, oh, I'm like, for me, I'm like, I remember how sad I was when I found out that like Santa wasn't real, because I just felt like I was like lied to. And it was like, how could I believe this? I feel like I look like an idiot. And I had like all these emotions like around it. So I know that put me in a state of like, well, I'm not going to be fooled like this again. Yeah. And then you have things like, you know, hearing stories and like learning from Jesus, you're like, brain's like, you know, we've believed things before that sounded good too for us, and then they didn't turn out so good. So it does take work, even in like how even to share with my friend with her births. It's like, it takes work to unlearn what we've learned before we're able to learn something new. And thinking that you can do that by yourself, I would just check like the heart behind that. Like, why don't you want someone to help you? Or why don't you want it to go faster? Like life is but a vapor. We have such a short set of time here on earth that it's like, yeah, sure, you could figure it out, but do you want to have it figured out in your 80s? Or like, right, do you want to take 20 years from now? Or like, do you want to just like get the thing done now and like have the clock stop now, have a pain-free birth now, like have the wildly successful businesses now, like have the marriage now? It's like, God's not, a lot of times people are like, I'm waiting on God, like waiting on him. It's like, he's waiting on you. He's like, I already gave you power and authority. I already gave you dominion. He's like, I'm just waiting for you to agree with me so we can do the thing.
Wow. When you put it like that, it sounds so simple.
It is so simple. So it's like, well, what if it was this simple?
What if it was?
We just overcomplicate it.
Yeah. Dang. We overcomplicate it.
Mm-hmm. Like, look, I had a home birth, pain-free, in 30 minutes. Well, I even think of like my last birth, like, so my third and fourth, I didn't even hire a midwife. Now, I'm not saying this to like advocate for like, ooh, yeah, do it like unassisted. It's like, you do you and what your relationship is with God. I know it's available. So when I know a lot of times people are like, oh my gosh, it's so expensive to have a baby and like the doctor bills and the hospitals and this and this. I'm like, I think I spent $150 to have my last baby. Like on a new tub liner, because I have my own blow up tub, like on a new tub liner, like a cord clamp. I mean, like, and I'm 150 might even be high. Like that might even include like the diapers and the outfit I bought. Like, I mean, like all in being ready to like labor, delivery, and post, where it's like they're, I don't know, people spending $20,000, $60,000 for hospital bills for babies.
Wow.
Where it's like that's become like the norm, right? Like, oh, this is what we do. This is what we do. It's like, and I know that it's possible that there's a woman right now hearing me like, well, that's nice for you, Danielle. It's great that it works out for you. But I would just think about what that but is that wants to come out of your mouth, that you're believing about yourself. Because God says he's a respecter of no persons. What he'll do for one, he'll do for another. So if he's showing this testimony through my life, it's not because it's for Danielle, it's because it's for you. And that's why you're hearing it. But oftentimes we're like, well, that's just so great that can, work out for that person. Or they don't know my past. They don't know my circumstances. I'm like, you don't know my past. You don't know my circumstances. They're just assuming that we're different. Well, actually, what if we're not? So I was like, I don't know, having a baby at home, not having to leave. Had our last baby at 11:40 at night. I tell Walden all the time, I'm like, you are so blessed that your wife has babies so easy. Do you know how blessed you are? And I'm like, because of my faith, you know how blessed you are. You don't have to go sleep in some chair at the hospital or be uncomfortable or get fed crackers. Like you have the luxury of your own home and the freedom to do whatever. And this birth costs $150. Like, is it like easy? Like it's simple, easy. Like, and if we had more time and I shared you details of my first, I would not classify my first as simple or easy or $150. Like none of those things are probably the same at all.
Wow.
Like one example is I got a little thing of liquid Motrin for the cramping after, like your uterus contracts when you're like nursing. And we're laughing like, I just took this baby naturally, but I need like liquid Motrin because my cramps are so intense. Which, by the way, I did not need liquid Motrin for my supernatural.
Wow.
So, but because the birthing center was connected to like a hospital, and we had at the time, like I had what would be considered like really good insurance for like a hospital setting where it's like they pay 80%, I pay 20%. I just wanted to share this because I was like shocked. So I got this little cup of liquid Motrin, $350 is what it was on my bill. I could have gotten that at Walgreens probably for like $4.
Yeah.
But because it was in that setting, and that was 20% of what the total was. Like the insurance paid for 80%, it cost me $350. So I'm like, this, like, in what realm is that okay? Like I could have just like Instacarted that thing to the hospital instead if I would have known it was going to be $350. But it's like, right, people are like, well, I'm here, like you're subject to whatever it is you're handing over. Like if you want to think about it from a spiritual sense, you're handing over power and control. Like I'm subject to whatever they want it to be, whatever they want to charge, whatever they want to give me. And that was one of the big reasons why like I wanted to do it at home, because of that space. Like right when you're in this vulnerable state of delivering a baby, it's like, do you want to open up, like literally be in a vulnerable state where you could be in a place where you could lose all power and control over yourself and your baby? I didn't.
Yeah.
Like you need another thing to be thinking about when that's happening.
Yeah.
Or even when you're in a state, like I was sharing about my friend, her like singing and rejoicing, it's like just the freedom to like worship and just like have that. Not saying that you cannot worship like in a hospital, but you know, they might be like, you need to lay down, or you need to turn over, or you need to like, I really want to like touch me and be like, the monitor fell off your belly, and you need to this. And it's like at home, it's like no one's touching you. No one's telling you like you have to be in this position, or you've been in the water too long, or you need to get out. It's like, what if Holy Spirit's like, no, I want you right here. And now you have somebody like barking at you, telling you like, you can't be there. And you're like, actually, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be.
Wow. I think that last part too of like hearing from Holy Spirit, listening, hey, I have you exactly where you're supposed to be. That part is key.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing. I know you have so many more stories that you could share too. And but if somebody wants to like get a hold of you, hear more of your stories, because you do post some of them online, what would be the best way for somebody to like connect with you after?
Well, so you could either find me like on Facebook or Instagram under Danielle Fenster. Or you could find me, we could connect through miraclemovement.com.
Perfect.
Yeah. I did want to share, I know we had, like, you and I kind of had chatted about this too, just even sharing, like, obviously I have a deep conviction and passion around birth, but one of the reasons I'm like so passionate about it is because when you like can experience something like seeing the clock standing still, right? Or experience like what was painful that now no longer is painful. When you can experience these breakthroughs that you're like, I never thought that was possible, and it happens. It's like now you can apply this to that block you have in business, or that block you have in a relationship, like with your spouse or a parent or a sister or a brother. Then it's like, what if this was just like the template? Like even like working with a coach to like figure out like blocks you have. It's like, once I can get breakthrough in this area, it's like I can get breakthrough in every single area. It's not just one. Like he wants, like Jesus wants you to have freedom in every single area. So he's like, let's just pick one. Like, let's pick one. Like, where's like your most like frustrated point? Let's like figure this thing out, get breakthrough there. And then now let's just like apply it to other areas.
Wow. In every area.
Every area.
It's totally possible.
Yeah. It's not like, oh, we only have like, oh, there's just faith in birth. And like, it's like, this applies to faith in business.
That's what the new covenant gives.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I'm so excited. I know that this like podcast and your stories shifted people's beliefs. And so thank you for sharing them. Thank you for being willing to share your stories and to fight for other people's freedom.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for inviting me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Y'all definitely check out Danielle's posts and her on Facebook, Instagram, and her website. I'm going to link all of them down below so y'all can grab those links. And I can't wait to hear too, like what just hearing these stories is able to shift for other people. So Danielle, thank you for sharing, and y'all have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Mary.